He's a traitor, just so you know. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman, the ranking member. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I got a lot of worries about this NIL, and I have 2 grandsons coming up. They love football, basketball, the whole 9 yards. I worry about the number of times they can go through the portal. I worry about the agents and the collectives. Is there a standardization? Do they need to have some type of accreditation? And I worry about no limit on outside money. But I guess my first question, we're going to talk to Mr. Egbo, because you're a Wildcat. And, I went to high school, I was a Wildcat. And once a Wildcat, always a Wildcat. Yeah, just so you know. In your opinion, how many times can a student athlete transfer without expecting shortfalls to their educational attainment? Would it be once, twice, 5 times, 8 times, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't know if I have that answer. Actually, I do know that I don't have that answer. But I do think that student athletes, every student athlete's different at the stage that they enter into the portal. Some are grad students that have earned their degree already and are looking for a new opportunity, and others are 18, 19-year-old kids that are, for whatever case, entering the portal. So I just do think that there's different situations and circumstances, but I don't think it's I don't know the answer to that.
I know. We're trying to figure that out. I guess my follow-up to you is, does transferring during the semester affect a student athlete's academic success?
I mean, without question, in my opinion, I don't think that it's hard to see that a mid-semester transfer is very disruptive to the educational principles that Coach Beamer mentioned before. Like, at the end of the day, education is at the forefront and at the foundation of what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
So protecting that is important.
I agree. This goes to Coach Beamer. If other schools follow the dynamic approach to NIL that schools in the SEC have, where do you think college football will be in 5 years?
Well, if there's a national standard in regards to the legislation, but also with revenue sharing coming in with the optimism of the settlement next month, to me, it will level the playing field for for programs across the country, where we're all playing by the same rules, if we have the legislation and enforcement to back that.
Back it up. Mr. Whitman, this will go to you and Coach Beamer. Should university revenue sharing include performance-based bonuses? Like, say, in Mr. Beamer's case, you've got a quarterback that throws 3,000 yards and you beat Clemson. Should he get a bonus? You start, Mr. Whitman, and then we'll go back to Coach Beamer.
It's an interesting question. I think it's important to remember, under the terms of the settlement, the payments to our student athletes will come in the form of NIL licenses. And so the idea being, in the performance bonus context, that the better a student athlete performs, then the more valuable their NIL license becomes for the use by the institution or by the athletics program. And so we certainly are contemplating a system that would permit performance bonuses. I think a different question is how those are ultimately accounted for in terms of the cap structure that's being developed. But ultimately, we think performance bonuses have a place. Whether institutions ultimately choose to use them or not is a different question. I think one of the intentions of this process is to allow each school a lot of autonomy to determine for itself how best to structure its contracts and its relationships with its student athletes to make their institution as appealing as possible to potential student athletes.
Great.
Which I would agree with Mr. Whitman. In fact, that's a conversation that I literally just had yesterday morning with Dawn Staley, our women's basketball coach at South Carolina, in regards to bonuses. And yes, ma'am, if a player for us plays his tail off against Clemson and allows us to win, yes, absolutely.
Sorry, young man. I knew he was going to say that.
He got the first dig in.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right, this goes to Coach Beamer and Mr. Whitman. How should a student athlete's fair market value be generated? I know you're speechless.
It's a really important question, and certainly we are champions of our student athletes' NIL rights. It's important that we look for ways to separate true market-based, arm's-length transactions that support our student athletes and their legitimate NIL interests from the synthetic, artificial, competitive-based NIL opportunities that have been created over the last handful of years. And so we certainly don't have an interest in micromanaging those opportunities for our student athletes. In fact, we want to continue to try and help facilitate and create those in the ways that are permitted under the most recent changes to NCAA rules. But it's important that we do try and create some system to monitor that, to create some level of transparency. Our student athletes want that transparency. Those working within our system want that transparency. And ultimately, we also know that this isn't going to be a perfect system at the outset, and we'll continue to evaluate it, improve upon it. But we feel confident that here at the beginning, as we develop a clearinghouse with a partner like Deloitte, a very reputable firm, that we'll be in a strong position to make those assessments.
And I would agree, the fair market value range of compensation, there's no cap on that. So I want to be clear that we're all for our student athletes being able to make as much as they possibly can in legitimate NIL outside income. But what we need is transparency and a clearinghouse, like we're saying, that will give us that the teeth in that.
Okay, very good.
And we want to take into consideration that some of the players that, you know, such as the offensive lineman, we have a senator, I mean, we have, maybe a future senator, but a senator right here, that they also be compensated as well fairly, even though they don't get the recognition they deserve.
Yeah, really. I love the offensive line, just FYI. All
They
right.
spell relief. That's
Okay.
for sure. Okay.
I yield
All right,
back.
now,